Good evening and welcome to ELOSOFUMARTAKES. This is our 259th take, live from the Alec Bradley Lone Star studio of Azle, Texas. I'm your host, Bear Duplessis, as always, and I'm so proud, so pleased, and so privileged to be with you all tonight. This is going to be a fantastic show. A first-time guest tonight that I've been waiting a really long time to have on, and it's entirely my fault that it's taken this long. Not our guest's fault at all, and he's been so gracious and so patient and so willing to come on every time I ask him, and it's finally happening tonight. But before we get to formal introductions, I do have to thank the people that make this show possible, and that, of course, is our sponsors. And tonight's show is sponsored by Drew Estate. Drew Estate's done it once again, bringing back the iconic size of the Papas Fritas, now available in the historic H99 blend. Yes, the Liga Privada H99 is now available in the iconic Papas Fritas brand size, and it is one to behold. Everyone is excited about Papas Fritas coming with the new H99 blend, and all Drew Estate fans are going crazy. So check out your Drew Diplomat retailers today for the new Liga Privada H99 Papas Fritas. Get your hands on some today and enjoy. And without further ado, everybody, welcome to our 259th take. It is my esteemed pleasure to welcome in tonight's guest, sponsored by United Cigars. Smoke one today and start living united, Mr. Ian Reith of Dapper Cigar Company. Ian, how you doing tonight?
Very good, Bear. Thank you very much for having me on finally.
You are welcome. I am so sorry that it has taken so long to get you here, and that, like I said, it's entirely my fault. So, but it's happening finally tonight, and I'm so excited because your cigars have been something that I've been so excited. I've been really enjoying over the last few years, and I've just really we'll get to a little bit more of this here in a little bit, but I think I've mentioned this to you when I had the opportunity to interview you at the PCA show a couple years ago. But I used to work in retail, and I had a customer that probably, let's just say, he was probably had one of the pickier palates that I've ever met in my entire life. And he had no qualms about telling people to their face if their cigar sucked, in his opinion. And he, like, I mean, this guy pretty much hated everything. I mean, like, worse than Aaron Loomis of Developing Palates hated everything. And Aaron's at least courteous sometimes. Like, this guy was just kind of an asshole. But he comes in one day and he's wearing a hat, Dapper Cigar Company. And I was like, where did you get the hat? And he's like, oh, the blah, blah. I went to this event, it was Cut and Light or something like that. And he's like, I was like, you're wearing the hat. I was like, did you like the cigars? He's like, yeah, they're really good. I'm like, I'm sorry, what? He's like, they're really good. And I was like, okay, slow down, go back again. And he's like, no, they're really good. And then he actually ended up giving me some. And of course I smoked them, and I was like, and I agreed with him, but he was blown away by him, and loves your cigars. And so, like, it was quite the feat. And in honor of that gentleman and another picky gentleman that we both know, Mr. Aaron Lewis of Developing Palates, I'm wearing his shirt tonight that he gave me because the Dapper La Madrina shade was one of his favorite cigars a couple years back, and he actually got to tell you on a podcast too. So that's some high praise from picky people that I know. So that's why.
Yeah, that's very flattering. I mean, to be honest, it's kind of it makes me feel good about making hats, because that's the whole point. Like, this is the story that you want to have people that wear your hats, because they're proud that they want to represent something that they really believe in. So that's very flattering. I mean, it makes me feel like we're doing a good thing on that side of it. And you're in a part of the country that we're not really well represented, I think, at this point in time. So it's also great to hear that it was local to you.
Yeah.
In an area. I always feel like it's a place that we could do a lot better in.
Yeah, and it was just it wasn't too long after you got started too, which is, and he still does. He still loves your cigars, still has the hat. And this is a guy who, like, does not, like, wear a lot of cigars. He's a big cigar smoker. I see him all the time still. And still has that hat, but is still the same as picky as ever. And yeah, but your cigars for him have stand the test of time. So yeah, it's some pretty high praise from some picky palates that I know, man. You gotta know that you're doing something great. But I want to smoke one of the cigars tonight too. It looks like you've already lit up. So as tradition here on the show, I always ask my guests to choose my cigar for me. So I've got some choices that I think you'll like. We talked about this a little bit before the show went started. I picked up at Paladin Cigars in Fort Worth, Texas today. I picked up a Siempre Sun Grown Toro, a La Madrina Toro.
Okay.
I'm more of a Robusto guy. I grabbed 2 Toros, but that's cool. I mean, not a big deal at all. Got a blast from the past, the Cubo Sumatra Robusto.
Yeah. Okay.
And both Desvalitos. The Diesla in the Robusto size, I believe. That's the Robusto.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then the Lonsdale in the original Desvalito.
Oh my God. Well, so if I were to choose based on what I like, all the cigars obviously I like to some extent, but Desvalito Lonsdale I think is an exceptionally interesting cigar. I smoked that a lot myself. I haven't lately because we've been back ordered about 3 months, but I love that cigar. I think that's my personal choice. If we go by rating choices, I would choose other things. If we go by what our sales numbers are, so we choose something else. I mean, if we went by the ratings of the cigars, I think our Cubo Sumatra did real well one year in that Robusto for half wheels top. It made like a top 10 list a few years ago.
Yeah.
And then in terms of our sales, like if you were to smoke what we sell more than anything, then La Madrina would be the choice. But I'm gonna go different here, and I'm gonna recommend to you what I enjoy smoking, and I would say the Desvalito Lonsdale with the purple label. That would be the one that I would recommend.
Sounds great. I'm looking forward to it. All right, perfect. So we got this one here, and I'm going to go ahead and give it a cut and a light, and we're going to
envious, by the way, because I don't have any of them. We're a little back ordered on them, and
well, that's a good. I mean, that's a good and bad thing. Obviously, no one wants to be back ordered, but I mean, obviously that means they're selling, so that's a good thing. So,
yeah, they sell for what a Lonsdale sells. It's like it's very close to the Lancero, right? You got to kind of be in the cigar geeky realm of things to gravitate towards the Lonsdale sizes, right?
yeah, I like thinner ring gauges. Typically, that's why I kind of shocked that I picked the Toros today. I just saw them and I just grabbed a couple, and foolish me, I also thought I grabbed an El Borracho, but I didn't apparently, or it's in the other room and I just didn't bring it in here either way. But I had plenty of choices, so I wasn't really sweating it too much. But I do like the nerdier sizes. I like Coronas, I like Lonsdales. I do love Lanceros too and everything. What other Vitolas does the original Desvalito come in besides the Lonsdale?
Yeah, so I mean, we do a standard 5x50 Robusto, we do a 6 and an 8x52 Toro, and then we have kind of a double Corona-ish size. It's like 6 3/4 by 54-ish. It's probably should be like a 7x56, but I'm kind of got like a affinity towards not going a little bit too big on the ring gauges. But yeah, it's of the 4 sizes, obviously the wheelhouse is Robusto Toro. I can't tell you enough people. I just was at a cigar store earlier today, had a guy come out of the blue and just tell me that Robusto is his daily cigar. And it's always nice to hear that kind of stuff when it's a cigar that you really like, that resonates with you. And so that was real nice to hear. And that cigar took a long time to kind of come to market. And it just took too long. And I kind of got a little bit of writer's block and just kept pounding away at it. And then it all really worked out for me. And of all of the sizes in the Desvalito, that Lonsdale, I really enjoy extremely much. It's something that whenever I smoke it, it like, you know, kind of puts a smile on my face a little bit. Okay, maybe it was worth beating up myself for all those years doing it.
The name Desvalito, it's like one without hope or something like that, right?
Yeah, you know, it's a funny story behind that. I've always loved the term more than I think the meaning, and I think in Spanish it has different meanings when it comes to Cuban Spanish and regular Spanish. What really resonated to me more of was the underdog theme of that cigar. So the fact that you're like somebody that maybe shouldn't be doing something, that's maybe you're counted out. And so that's why all the branding elements of that cigar are kind of very royal-esque. They're very contrary to the name. It's you know, even the coloring is specifically a very royalish kind of purplish blue. The crown elements, there's a fighting cock in it. There's a lot of elements to that cigar that are kind of, you know, that play with the idea of being an underdog and not being able to do something in a category.
It's funny. It's the first time I've noticed the crowns, and I honestly hadn't thought much about it until a couple days ago when I was pulling it out and getting ready for the show and everything today. And I spent some time over in the UK last month well, no, it's August now. So back in June, earlier this summer. And like, that's when I pulled it up and I saw the rooster. It reminded me a lot of crests I saw while I was over there. So yeah, so that's awesome. Yeah, I love the correlation. So
yeah, so the reason the rooster, it's not only prominent, you know, from the fighting cock standpoint, not only prominent in Spanish and Spanish culture, but also it's my year of my zodiac kind of year, Chinese zodiac thing.
Oh, okay, nice.
If you'll notice, one thing people don't notice at all is there is actually a spike on the foot of the rooster.
Oh, I do see that now. Okay.
And that was a very controversial thing as to whether to leave that in, not to offend any folks in the non-violence for animals kind of realm, but yeah, so there's a lot of like hidden things in the band, little Easter eggs.
Yeah, I was gonna say I like Easter eggs and imagery, so that's pretty cool. Well, fantastic. Yeah, we're gonna we'll dive a little bit more, I guess, into Desvalito here, because I was really excited. You said that it took a while to come to market and everything about this. What was it about this project in particular that was so challenging for you then? Was it just like the blend wasn't coming together right? Or I mean,
yeah, at the time, we kind of, so to take people back, this was in the FDA registry period. So this was the weird period where all of us boutique cigar manufacturers didn't know if we would continue being able to make cigars because of the FDA registrations and the looming FDA guidelines and the warning labels were the first part of it, et cetera. And so in preparation for all of that, we had made a bunch of brands and ahead of time. And we had done Siempre Sungrown, Siempre Zato, El Borracho, and La Madrina. We'd made a bunch of brands, and one of the brands that I'd done was Desvalito. And I wanted to save that one specifically for what I felt like was a blend that I could truly say was like my cigar. And from not only the branding perspective, not that I didn't want to be associated with being a drunkard or whatever, but I wanted to really have this cigar as the one that I really knuckled down on, really figured out what I wanted to be impressed with in terms of a blend, in terms of everything I liked about cigars, from the wrapper presentations, from the retrohale that you get, from the complexity that you get, all of these things. I wanted it to all come together, and I wanted that brand to resonate for me because of, obviously the underdog theme, the theme. I remember telling my Cuban friends the name of it, and they were just like, "Oh my God, you can't call it that. You should never call it that." And so yeah,
and that's when you were said, I'm gonna call it that.
I'm calling it that. Yeah, no. And you know what? I'll be honest with you. Everything was kind of a little bit uneasy. And I think I remember it going on half wheel. And I remember describing the blend a little bit and stuff. And the one comment that I was like, I still remember, was really tickled by it, was I think Steve Saka said something very nice about the blend, or about wanting to try the blend and loving the brand. And I was like, oh shit, that's great. Like, because yeah, I just thought that that's to have somebody that's a good brander that's been in the industry a long time. It's just so hard to figure out what you're going to do in terms of a cigar, in terms of a brand, in terms of how it wants to feel, how you want to taste. All these things that are very difficult to do when you come to market with a product. So yeah, I was happy that it took the time that it took to get the blend how I wanted it, and how the packaging came out. It all kind of came together. And it's not our best selling cigar to this day, but it sells well, and it resonates well. And yeah, I mean, I'm really it's one of the projects I'm proud of in terms of what we've made.
Well, especially since you put so much time into it, it's good to see like that. Like you said, I mean, it may not be the number one cigar in your portfolio, but it's something that you obviously can be proud of, and that it's really resonated with your consumers and everything. So that's great. I am digging the retrohale on this thing. That's what's really great about it. Now, what I like about this too, or what has caught my attention specifically, is I don't like a super loose draw, and of course nobody likes a plug draw, but I do like a little bit of resistance on my draw. Coop and I talk about this all the time. It's like we call it our perfect draw, which is, we equivocate to basically a milkshake, essentially, just that little bit of a pull. And
Yeah.
this has that, and I really like it. So
That's tough. I mean, I agree with you. I think that I'm on the same page in terms of what you like in terms of a draw. I was just explaining to somebody the other day that the problem with getting that draw is you're like walking the tightrope between plugged, and not plugged, and it's such a fine tightrope. And when you get to the plug category, it's like you run the risk of losing that customer because of a tight cigar. And so I think there's a consumer expectation these days with how well cigars are made in general. I think there's a consumer expectation to have that draw that you're talking about, to have the weight and the feel of something that's substantially packed, but the ability to draw from it and whatnot.
Yeah, and I mean, it's actually really funny. Like, I've had the last like 4 cigars this weekend, including this one that I've smoked, I've had that perfect draw. So it's been a really great weekend for me, because I've definitely gone on runs where it's gone the opposite direction. And it's always nice to just to obviously not have that problem and just go on a run and stuff. So but I'm like I said, I'm really enjoying it so far. I've even though that there's a firmer draw to this, I'm already kind of puffing it down. And like I said, the retrohale is very unique. So I'm really looking forward to it. So I'll be honest with you, I didn't tell you this before because I didn't want to impact your decision. This is my first one. This is my first Desfilito, so I'm excited. So
it's worked well for both of us.
Cool. But I mean that before we go into our major point here, there was something that I've been meaning to ask you every time I meet you, because and I have a funny story, because after I used Google, I thought it was hilarious. But the last name Reith, is that what ethnic origin is that?
Yeah, so that's a German last name.
Oh, okay.
However, I don't have a lot of Germanic roots. My grandfather was adopted by a German farming family in the Ohio region.
Interesting.
So yeah, my grandfather, my father's father was a orphan, and and he was adopted by a German farming family, and so he took on their last name as as the right thing to do, or what he felt was the right thing to do for the family that adopted him, and they adopted him, I believe, in his early teenage years.
Oh, interesting. Okay. I know you've lived all over the place and everything. We'll get to that here in a second with our major point. But the funny story I had with Google is I was looking for images, public images to use, put up for our advertisement for tonight's show and use. So I Googled, Ian Reith. I was like, surely I said Ian Reith. I did Ian Reith first, and then I do like Ian Reith Cigars or Ian Reith Dapper, and then I Google image search. The first thing that pops up is apparently this really stellar high school basketball player that couldn't look any different from you, which is hilarious. But this 17-year-old kid who's apparently really great at basketball, named Ian Reith, spelled the same way and everything. So that was quite funny as I pulled that up.
Yeah, no relation. And there's also a gentleman named Brad Reith, who's like apparently a prominent retailer online.
Oh, okay.
Deals cigars or something like that.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, and he's quite a big dude. He's jacked, he's like completely jacked and doesn't look anything like me. And we don't even sell cigars to him, so it's not like I have a skin in the game.
That's funny. Oh, that's hilarious.
But yeah, exact same last spelling of the name. And he's like out of Arizona, or I think he's out of Phoenix or
he's even on that side of the country too. That's crazy.
I know.
Funny.
He's like a really nice guy, but yeah, Brad Reith, apparently he's very prominent online if you look it up for retail sales for cigars.
It's like Dave Garofalo of Two Guys, and then there's a John Garofalo, spells like Garofalo the same way, and they're both cigar retailers and not related at all. At all. And because John Garofalo has apparently a cigar brand too that he does a few accounts with. They're pretty good cigars. I think they're made by Aganorsa, and I guess a friend of mine was like talking to him about the cigars and stuff. Like, hey, are you related to Dave? And he's like, no, absolutely not. Not even nothing. And I was like, oh, that's just too funny. But that's funny that there's a Brad Reith on that side of the country that's a retailer too. So that's funny. But that kind of leads me into our major point, because I wanted to talk a little bit about your family, because it's to me, it's what I've heard is there's so many interesting things about it. So we'll get to tonight's major point, which is always brought to you by the people. Yes, cigar people, the people who know everything about a lifetime of service. Protocol Cigars is more than just pool parties and good times. Well, maybe it is. But behind the motivation is a motivation for service, a motivation for giving back. From the original Protocol Blue to the latest release in the Lawman series, Phoebe Cousins, Protocol has always been about honor, passion, and yes, the people. It's what their life's work has been and always will be about. Power of the P, Protocol Cigars. So Ian, we talked about your grandfather, and then, but I know your dad had it was a major influence on your life and how you got into cigars and stuff like that. But he was also a military man, which led to you living all over the place, because you were actually born in South Korea, right?
Yeah, so I'm half South Korean and half like Scottish Irish. Matter of fact, I think
hence the Ian, right?
Yeah, right. Yeah, actually, yeah, and I ironically, had my grandfather not been adopted, I think my last name would have been O'Robin, which would have really been true. That would have been pretty confusing for people.
Yeah.
Skittles commercial, basically, is what I would have been. Yeah, but yeah, my father was in the service. He was in the Air Force. And to be fair, most of my family are in the military. So my father was in the Air Force, and he didn't start that way. He started in the Navy and then he ended up in the Air Force.
Oh, wow.
He actually, he went to the Naval Academy for a little bit, and then he got out and he went to the Air Force. And my uncles, I have an uncle that was a Green Beret in the Army. That was his older brother. His other younger brother was in the Navy. His oldest sister was the Air Force, so, and then his father was in the Army as well. He's a tank guy. And so that's where like the Major Mike's themes comes
Right.
from.
Right.
Dad's
Right.
Mike. My dad is he was a major, and his name is Mike. And so that's why the shade, and he smokes shade cigars a bit. And so that's why the shade version is Major Mike's in the shade. And then the Army one, his father was an Army major, and he's a tank guy. So that's why there's a tank on the Army version. But yeah, my entire family was very military. But my father, I wouldn't be really into, I probably wouldn't be into cigars at all, and I wouldn't be doing anything with cigars had I not grown up with my father smoking cigars. Now, my father didn't smoke expensive cigars. He couldn't, the cigars that we're enjoying and smoking today.
They're like JR bundles, right? That's what he used to gravitate towards.
Yeah, and and to take it back even further and kind of like just go to show you how small the world can be sometimes. My father did buy a lot of JR bundles back from JR Cigars back in the 90s. And he was buying cigars from, newsletters and things that were basically marketing materials from Steve Saka. And the cigars that were being
Holy kidding, man. That is a small world.
And the cigars that were made at Noxa, where I'm making cigars today. And
no shit.
Yeah, so this is how small the world really is. And I've talked to Steve about this stuff, and that's why I've kind of pieced together the history of all this. But it goes to show you, I was a kid, and this was a guy that was buying cigars from my father was buying cigars, cheap cigars, affordable cigars from newsletters from JR, written by a guy, marketed to by a guy that's a legend in the business, Steve Saka. He's had a lot of input in the branding of everything, and made at a factory that I now make, all of our cigars that are on the market. So what a trip, right?
Wow. Wow, man. That's cool. That, man, God, I forgot. I didn't make that connection because I remember hearing in an interview once where you talked about your dad buying from JRs and the magazines and stuff like their news or catalogs or whatever.
Yeah.
But I forgot Steve worked for them.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
He was their head of marketing for a number of years.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. What a
trip, right? Like,
yeah, I'm like, yeah, I'm thrown off, man. I really am. That's crazy. That's such a small world. It just goes to we always, this industry is so tiny anyway. Like everybody, like I was trying to explain this to people outside of the industry, like in particular my mother, who really doesn't get it either. And she was like, well, what do you do at this trade show thingy? And I was like, well, at the thingy, I get to talk to, a lot of people that manufacture cigars and she's like, oh, well, that sounds really interesting. And I was like, it is. I was like, there's some really great stories. And she's like, well, tell me one. And so I've told her a few. And so I'm going to go back and tell this story. She probably won't get as big of a charge out of it as I did, but that's fine. But it's I was trying to explain to her how small how like large, but how small the community really is, and how like a lot of people know everybody. And so that's a perfect example of it. So
crazy.
So going back to, like, again, everybody in the story, my father was a veteran too, which is part of what I really like about the Major Mike story and about your story too in particular. How much time when you were born? I know you said you're half Korean, so that's obviously where your mother's from. But like, did you guys spend a lot of time there, or because of the military? You moved pretty young.
Yeah, I didn't. I was born there, and I spent my first couple years there, in Seoul. But after that, I'd lived all over the country, and I'd lived in, you name it, but Anchorage Air Force Base, Elmendorf Air Force Base in Anchorage,
Yeah,
Alaska.
my brother-in-law was stationed there. Yeah, I got you.
I kind of spent a large amount of time as a child, or in my early teens, in Biloxi, Mississippi. So Keesler Air Force Base. And so that's where I kind of tell people where you're from, because, if you're, as people in the military brats, you're never really from anywhere. but you kind of take the place that you were the longest, and that's kind of where you were from.
Right.
And so, yeah, I spent time there, Travis Air Force Base, Fairfield, California, Tyndall. My father actually went to grad school for a bit, so I lived in Richmond, Virginia, because he went to Virginia Commonwealth. While he was in the service, they sent him to grad school. And so, yeah, I kind of San Antonio, Texas, you name it.
Another big Air Force town. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, my father was actually, he went to high school at Waco High.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Most of my father's family is all in Texas. We have family in San Antonio, Texas, and Austin, Texas, and Waco, Texas. You name it. Well, now I don't know about Waco anymore, but various places in Texas, Dallas. My dad spent some time in Austin. I mean, a lot of my family, I mean, by all rights, I should probably be living in Texas. That's probably what would have made more sense. But I ended up here in California after my father retired in the service. So yeah, I lived everywhere a little bit, and did the whole military brat thing.
This is a place that really doesn't come up very much in my conversations. So, I mean, you claim, again, you just explained why you claim it and everything. What were some of your like fonder memories of Biloxi, Mississippi? Like, what did you really enjoy about it?
Man, I love Biloxi, Mississippi. I'll be honest with you. I joke about it all the time that I want to retire there. And not maybe in Biloxi, maybe in Ocean Springs, but when I was there, I had a very even though I'm in California, I think anybody that grows up in the South has an affinity for the South. There's just a certain affinity, regardless of the weather, regardless of the of any of the bad things. Like I remember being in Mississippi at that time, and people would joke that of the 50 educational systems in the country, Mississippi was ranked number 50. But I always thought it was great. I had lots of great friends. I had a very diverse group of friends growing up in the military, something that I think people don't get. Even my own kids, they don't get that sort of diversity, because when you're in the military, there's just a large, diverse number of ethnicities and races and everything. We had kids on the military base that their fathers were Turkish. They were Turkish because their fathers were, or I'm sorry, Israeli because their fathers were F-16 fighter pilots that were training, cross training, and you have such a diverse group of people that you meet from all over the world. And so growing up there, it was really great to meet all those people. And it was, growing up on a military base is also very safe. People don't, like today I take for granted that, but it used to be, and I think today, and I don't know about Texas where you live, but there's a certain element that you feel of danger with your kids.
Oh yeah.
Letting them go out, letting them just roam around, be home whenever you'd like. And growing up on military bases, there really wasn't a sense of danger ever. It was a sense of you can kind of go and be a kid and do whatever you'd like to do, and your parents didn't have to worry about your physical safety. And so being in the South, also being in the military, it was great. It was really a great childhood. I wish my kids could have that kind of childhood. And I wish they could make the kind of friends that you make, living close to people. When you live in military housing and all your houses, you're all the same. You share carports with people. You have to mow your lawn every week. You got to put the flag out in the front of the house. There's really endearing elements to all that stuff. And so I missed a lot of that. I'm glad that I went through it as a child. And so, Biloxi and the South, it kind of really, and growing up on military bases, it really had a profound impact on the person I am and the people that I value, and the kind of life that comes with that.
Well, I always say, we're always, we could always use more cool people in Texas. So if you and your family ever want to move out here, your guys are welcome. So
Yeah, thank
a
you.
lot,
We might be there.
a lot of people from your state are already flocking here anyways. You might as well join them. So
Yeah, and I apologize about that. I tell everybody I know, I'm like, all right, man, I'm just gonna tell you, we're from California, and from people from Texas. I go, look, man, I'm sorry, a lot of people are moving. I can't vet them all, but no,
no, but
Texas is a great, great state, and what I love about Texas, I visit there a little bit for family, a little bit for business. But what I always love about Texas more than anything are the people. There's a sense of genuineness and a sense of kindness. And I think that also extends to the South. Not to say
yeah.
that people are not kind in California or they're not kind anywhere else. But I think there's just a certain sense of that Southern kindness that really permeates in Texas. And there's also a sense of, and I don't know if it's a good thing, but people from Texas are usually generally very proud they're from Texas. And I think,
Oh, 1,000%.
yeah, and I think,
Yeah.
and that's endearing. I think that resonates with people. And I think everybody would like to feel that same way about their state.
Yeah.
But people from Texas are always genuinely proud to be a Texan, and that you have to love that.
Well, whenever I travel abroad, and I mentioned I traveled to the UK earlier this summer and everything, like whenever people ask me where I'm from, I tell them the truth. I don't lie to them. I'm just like, hey, I'm Texan. I'm from Texas. And I mean, we were in a bar in Edinburgh, Scotland, the World's End. Yes, the bar with the World's End, like of movie fame and everything like that. But which has a great story, and it was like really cool to be there and everything. Um, there's a group of guys. I was in line to get a beer, and there's a group of guys next to me, and that like they heard my American accent. They're like, "Oh, where are you from?" And I Texas. Like I mean, like, oh, they ended up buying my wife and I, beers and yeah. I mean, it was like the best thing ever. And one of them was like really funny. He's like, yeah. I was like, hey, you guys are welcome in Texas anytime. He's like, oh no, I wouldn't be welcome. I'm like, what are you talking about? He's like, well, I'm a communist. And I'm like, dude, we take all types, man. It's all good. I'm like, you bought me a beer. You can't be that bad.
You're good.
Yeah.
So, like we got him too. We got him here.
Yeah. I was like, you could buy a round or two, man. I think no one would give a shit. So it's totally fine. That's really great. But I think it's what you were talking about with the friendliness of the South. I think it's a familial kindness. Like people are kind all over, as you mentioned, but it's very much like they they welcome you or are kind to you as like in the way that you are to relatives.
Yeah.
Like it's what I call familial kindness. Like people are just genuinely nice other places, but you're right. It's different. They're nice because they're nice people, not because they're treating you like you're their long lost cousin or something. It's different.
Right.
So,
Right.
but getting back to your dad with like smoking cigars and everything, and I know you said like he didn't really, get into like what we're smoking too often. And what was it about? Like, was it just because it was your dad and you wanted like most sons, they want to be like him? Like, what was it about the cigar smoking that attracted you to cigar smoking at a younger age?
I don't know if I was particularly attracted to it when I was younger, because I know my mom had complained about it quite a bit. It wasn't exactly on her best of his attributes, but it was one of those things where he just enjoyed it so much. And my dad wasn't a social smoker, for a lot of my career, especially being in the cigar business. We're in kind of the mode of social smoking. We go to cigar stores, we smoke with other people. It's a point of congregation. A lot of my friends that I've met over the years, they're people that are cigar smokers. So when I look back on my father wasn't a social cigar smoker. He was a solitary cigar smoker, but he really was, it really did, speaking for him, I don't know if he would tell me this exactly, but from what I gathered, he really looked forward to being able to have a little bit of solace and enjoying a cigar with a good glass of whiskey or a good glass of scotch in his reflection at night, and being able to escape it. He had a lot of responsibility in the service, and he had a stressful job. And I think what resonated was how much he enjoyed that, and how much actual genuine peace it kind of brought to his life. Excuse me. And I always kind of knew that when Dad's out back smoking a cigar and having his glass, that's his time. That's his time to unwind and reflect and prepare for the next day. And so I'd always looked at that end of it, and then I'd always looked at the other end of his joy of reading these catalog things and learning about these cigars from the marketing materials, and
Steve Saka barely from.
Yeah, I know. And then waiting for the products to come so he could put them in his igloo. He used to have these igloo humidors that the igloo coolers that he would put in there. And I remember he'd show me how to make a little.
The one where you press the button and it slides the thing back.
Yeah.
Oh man.
One. Yeah. And then he would show me, he would use these little Tupperware, canisters, and he would take a sponge. I mean, this was before Boveda. This is like, he'd take the sponge and you'd fill it with distilled water, and you poke holes in the top of the Tupperware, and you'd set that puppy in the little humidor.
It's pretty innovative, man.
Well, it's, like I said, anybody I think in the military knows you're not getting paid tremendously. You're on a fixed income. You don't have the means generally in the military to be big balling it. And so there was no diamond crowned humidors in his life or anything with Boveda packs. And, there's no sophisticated humidifications that were affordable back then. And he was, for him, I think the true beauty of it is that he enjoyed cigars for what they were, without any branding or without any of the hype. It was about enjoying cigars and having to make an influence to you. And God, I wish we could all maybe be a little bit more like that. I wish in some respect we could, not from a brand perspective, because gosh, man, we'd have to make our cigars cheaper and remove the bands and and not have a lot of selling points. But that was very admirable, and that's what made an impression on me when he was going through when my childhood, and he was enjoying cigars, and that's what I saw, and that later would make a big impression to me in my 20s, when I was in the same point when I needed to lean on cigars to provide a little bit of that stress release, a little bit of that
escape
time. Yeah.
It's funny, this is going to come up a little bit later in our conversation, but like going back to the Major Mike's project, obviously you make cigars that are, with a lot more rare tobaccos and refined tobaccos and everything. But when you created Union Break, I remember having this conversation with you, and I think you put the same kind of TLC into Major Mike's too. Those cigars don't smoke like value cigars.
Right.
The Major Mike's I've had, and like, holy crap, those things are fantastic. Absolutely. Just like, it's like, this is, I'm enjoying this way too much. Like, it's like, I'm getting away with something here. Like, as I'm like lighting up those things.
That's the number one thing that we get people tell us about the Major Mike's, is that there's no way that this should be your budget cigar. And I like that, because I tell people, I go, to be fair, even though the Major Mike's are a bunch of cigars, price wise, the tobacco that you're smoking is the same tobacco that we use on all of our premium cigars. They're just blended together in a mix, and they're sandwiched in a sandwich format. Right. They're not a pure long filler, but in terms of the quality of the tobacco, in terms of all of the ingredient components, we're doing the same thing that we do with all of our premium sticks. And I always think back, I had a conversation with my dad when I started making cigars at first, and I think he was a little bit skeptical at first, and then I remember making our first cigars, and they were shade cigars, Cubo Clara, and I remember sitting on the back patio with him, and he smoked the cigars, and he goes, Ian, he goes, these cigars are better than the ones that I ever smoked when when I was in the service and stuff. And I always thought, well, he's just a father being nice. He's just trying to he's just trying to build me up, and I appreciate that stuff. And then after I knew about what kind of cigars were being made at that time period, I'm like, yeah, Dad, those are actually way better cigars than the ones you ever smoked.
You're welcome. Yeah, you're welcome.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, it's interesting, like about the time that like he was smoking everything, like I'm assuming this is like early 90s, late 80s, mid 90s, around that range. I mean, that was a time too when like the cigar market was really flooded with, like, it was the boom, right? So like that was like there was a lot of poor quality, and today, like even with the renaissance that we've had in the last 5 years with like newer brands and everything like that, there's the quality of the tobacco, the quality of the blending and everything. There might be something that doesn't speak to people's palates.
Yeah.
But like overall, I would say as a general rule, there really isn't like cigars out there that are just absolute, just like dog shit.
Right.
There are ones that I definitely don't like, and there's ones that are definitely not good. But I have to imagine that that's just so much different. Because I mean, even when I started smoking, I started smoking on my 18th birthday, so we're talking early 2000s, and the humidors now are just drastically different than the humidors that I went into very early on in my late teens and early 20s, and the cigars are so much better.
Yeah.
And that's that's a credit to people like you, Ian, that like really took the time to really work with the people that you're working with. And so I don't want to escape this part of the story real quick, because I want to go back to something, because again, it being a small world and connecting the dots. So if your dad was in the military, contemporary around that time, that means your grandfather, who was a tank guy, was that Nam? Was that Vietnam? Was he in Vietnam?
So my grandfather was in World War II and the Korean War. So he had about 8 years of combat time, which was very usual. And I think it was 7 to 8 years of combat time in between the two. He was a tank guy in Korean War, and he was an infantry guy, Battle of the Bulge in World War II.
Oh my gosh! Okay.
Yeah, so he was a hard ass. He was an original hard ass, and he was he was in the Army the entire time, and he was a wartime accommodated officer. So it's not like he went to college to become an officer. He was actually promoted from the NCO ranks, or whatever the lower ranks are. The term escapes me right now, but
no, that's right. Non-commissioned officer to commissioned officer. Yeah.
Yeah. So there's some stipulations around that, but so my grandfather, very influential on me. Not a cigar smoker, certainly a whiskey drinker, certainly a drinker, not a cigar smoker. That's something that I think was very unique to my father, but certainly very influential in my life. And just being born an orphan, and then going through a couple wars, and I've always thought small weird circles or small circles of history. I've always thought, how weird would it have been for my grandfather, to have thought that his grandchild would be half Korean. So it's like you're literally fighting in a country, that eventually one of your grandchildren is half from that country that you were fighting in. So I always thought that was an interesting thing. And he'd actually spent a lot of time in Germany. I think my father was actually born in Germany, because my grandfather was stationed in Germany after the war, after World War II. And so, yeah, crazy history there, and a lot of interesting things.
Yeah, the reason I was asking was my father was a tank guy in Vietnam, so that's why I was like, man, if they're both tank guys in Vietnam, like this is way too weird. Like there's too many connections here. That's nuts. But yeah, I
My
mean,
my
just
dad's oldest brother was in Vietnam. So my dad's
okay.
oldest brother, Reith, is he was a Green Beret in Vietnam.
Oh
Uh,
wow. Okay.
he was the badass of the group apparently, and still is. But yeah, he was the one that served in Vietnam.
Crazy. So fast forward to you're an adulthood now. Like you're starting to smoke cigars and enjoy them and everything. So what was the catalyst or the crazy thing that happened in your life? Like, man, I'm gonna give this a try, and I'm gonna start my own cigar company. And
Yeah, that's yeah, you just I think it's a guy trait, right? We get into things heavily. It seems to be something that is a prominent theme in my life. And when I was in my early 20s, I started getting into cigars heavily as a social element, as a relaxation element. At some point after you're doing that, you kind of figure, oh, maybe it might be kind of cool if I made a few cigars, and even if I don't sell them, I'll smoke them myself, and it'll be great, be fun. It will be something to talk to people about. It's kind of similar to all the guys that do microbrewery, right? There's
right,
no, there's all these guys that they go into their garage and they go, yeah, I want to make my own beer. And that was my thing. I wasn't into microbrews. I was into, well, can we make my own cigar? It was a challenge, and it was just a challenge that stuck, and it was just a hobby that turned into a business that turned into something bigger. And yeah, so it very non-purposeful origins.
I mean, when you originally started, I mean, did you think where it would be where it's at today? I mean,
No, 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 never. No,
oh,
I
wow.
wouldn't. I wouldn't have thought ever that um, that we would sell as many cigars as we sell, or make as many cigars, or even make the level of cigars that we're making today. I would have never thought that. I it was too far. Even if you asked me in the first 3 years after doing it and trying to sell some cigars, I would have never thought we would be where we're at. It's just yeah, it's maybe I don't have that optimistic of an outlook, or maybe I'm just not that big of a dreamer, but it's just hard. I mean, you're always thinking about the problems that you have today, and you're always thinking about how can I just get to the next milestone. But to go from from one, from making a couple thousand cigars to making hundreds of thousands of cigars, it's a different ball game, and it's tough. It's not I'd love to say that the cigar business was akin to maybe the tech business, or maybe other businesses or other success stories that are very explosive or exponential in growth. But the cigar business for me has always been it's always been a very linear, slow growth kind of thing. Yeah.
So what are you forecasting for 2023? Like how many hundreds of thousands or thousands of cigars are you looking at?
I don't know. I mean, I hope that we can make 500,000 to 750,000 cigars.
Wow. Okay.
I hope that we can make. I don't know. I don't count things equally either. Because we make a lot of brands for other people. We make white labels for some folks now. We have a bunch of white label projects. We sell some cigars internationally. We make a lot of small cigars. Obviously, bundle cigars. They kind of crutch your numbers, right? Because selling a bundle cigars is a little bit different than selling a premium cigar. They just
Sure.
a lot faster. So yeah. But I don't
But
know. We'll see.
it's great that what I think that's really great about in your young time in the industry is that you've still very much diversified your portfolio to appeal like to the masses. I mean, like you have like you said, you have the bundles, which are important. They're not they keep the lights on for like these projects like Desfilito and stuff like that. It's
Yeah,
great.
I mean, for me, my goal is right now, I just think about trying to make all the cigars that fit all the categories, right? Um, I look at what we've done and I go, well, even though we've done all these things, I still feel like we need to make this category of cigar, this bracket of cigar, with major mics. Okay, we've got a great shade budget cigar, and we got a great Habano budget cigar, but well, there's more branches of services, right? So
There you go.
we can't ignore the branches of services, and there's other things like that. We don't make we've not made to this date what I consider to be ultra premium cigars. Now,
Yeah. I heard you talk about this in another interview, like
Yeah.
that's something on the horizon eventually for you, right?
Oh yeah, we're deep into that, and I do want to make cigars that what some of my friends call are quote unquote aspirational cigars. I mean, it's an oxymoron because I believe I think a lot of our cigars are all aspirational cigars. We try to make the very best cigars we can, but can we make cigars that maybe one day stand beside Davidoff's in terms of the retail presence, stand beside Padron, stand beside Opus X, stand beside Atabays, etc. These are what I consider to be, ultra premium cigars. So, working on, sorry, my nephew. No, we're working on those cigars because I want to have a product for every price point and every use case.
That's awesome. I think what's really, like I said, I think that's it's been really, that's why I think that's why your company's been so well received and everything. Because like you said, I mean, without minus that aspect of it that you're working on now, I mean, it's still a wide breadth of offerings for so many people. Now, I know the name Dapper came from, I guess it was in the early stages of when you were working with Kubo, and I guess someone had the kind of the eureka, what we call the eureka moment, and said this is a Dapper cigar.
Yeah,
and that was the name. So
yeah, I mean, nothing was purposeful in that perspective. We were struggling to find some sort of a brand. What do we call ourselves? I unfortunately didn't have a Cuban last name, or didn't have anything that I could throw out there that I could make as a heritage kind of brand. And so just little moments like that, as gimmicky or as non-gimmicky as things turn out to be. It's all been kind of a journey on all those various fronts. What do you call the brand? What do you even today we make a lot of cigars that are very Spanish themed and Spanish oriented. I can't tell you the number of customers that whenever I tell them, the El Borracho means the drunkard, they're tickled to death.
I remember when I was telling you the origin story of when I first heard about your brand, and I was doing some research on it, and I was like, Dapper Cigar Company, one of their cigars is the El Borracho, and I was like, well, that's an interesting spin on Dapper, so that works. But I mean, you started with the Cubo in a smaller factory, and just in the interest of time, I wanted to fast forward a little bit. You decided to make the move to Noxa, as you mentioned, you alluded to earlier. That's where all your cigars are made now, currently, correct?
Yeah.
This is a factory that is, I mean, for all intents and purposes, is just like scorching hot right now. They make some of your cigars, and they make some of, like Patina is made there, and of course, Steve Saka, we've mentioned him a few times tonight. His cigars are made there too. So, what was it about Noxa in particular that attracted you initially when you were thinking about the idea of making a production change somewhere?
Yeah, well, I mean, I wouldn't. Noxa had no bearing. The factory had no bearing as to making cigars. Like I never would have thought that we would make cigars at Noxa. And the only reason we make cigars at Noxa is because I had become very close friends with a guy named Gustavo Cura, who runs Oliva Tobacco's operations in Nicaragua. And he was at the time involved with the retro fitting of Noxa. And as part of that, Raul Diesla came in as a blender, and he was very involved in turning this factory around with Raul and the Oliva Tobacco family. And so because of my relationship with Gustavo and therefore Raul and therefore Oliva Tobacco, that's what angled me to work at Anoxa, is because of my sincere, admiration for Gustavo as having, he's my tobacco guidance, and my dear mentor per se. That's what led me to make cigars at Noxa, and then subsequently, Raul, working with Raul and having a production manager with that sort of skill set, and having the access to tobacco that Oliva Tobacco Company has. That is what led me to put my chips there. And now Noxa is has a very good name in the premium cigar community, but it wasn't that way 10 years ago. It was very, very different. And probably it wasn't even that way maybe 5 or 6 years ago. So a lot of work has been done at that factory to really transition to a factory that made lots of economy cigars, to a factory that makes also some very, very good premium cigars. And fortunately, due to guys like Steve, Roa, et cetera, that make cigars there, good cigar makers, that's what that's what got me in there. And I always tell people, I feel like the guy that went to the popular nightclub that couldn't get in and snuck in the back door. That's how I like. That's all of these other big cigar makers went there, and I snuck in the back door. And so that's always kind of been my mentality about that. But to say I was purposeful, and certainly not to say that I knew that Knox would become what it would become. No, I had no idea. I just really believed in my friend and my mentor, and I knew that by him being involved in that factory, it was going to become great, and that's why I went there.
That's awesome. Yeah, I think it's worthwhile pointing out that, it's sometimes that it really is, we were talking about how small the world is, and we've been connecting dots so far in our conversation, but there's these what I call canon moments or catalyst moments in our lives that really kind of drive us to where we end up, obviously, as a result of. And a lot of times in the very beginning, they don't seem like that big of a deal, or they don't seem as significant. And then later on they become it. And, you mentioned Raul Disla, who's, he's gotten so much notoriety in the I would say in the inner circle of the cigar industry. I think there's people that's out there that smoke your cigar, smoke Steve cigars, that don't know who Raul is. And that's a shame. But what I really love about Steve and you have done for someone like Raul is you've put his name on a cigar. I'm smoking the original Desvelito, but you have the Desvelito Disla,
right,
which was his blend. He actually blended. I know you always you're very hands-on with everything, but this was the one where you basically just kind of approved it.
Right.
Like I said, yeah, that works, and you paid homage to your friend there. And I think that's I think that's a credit to both y'all, because he has Steve's got the Unstolen Valor that Raul did, and and I really, really admire that, because I think there's so many people in this industry that really steer the industry and do a lot of great things behind the scenes that nobody knows about. And so for you to put his name on one, I mean, that's a beautiful homage.
I mean, I wish we were going to do more about that. At the end of the day, being a blender per se gets us to be a little bit of a prima donna, because production managers that run factories, they're there every day. They live the factory. They live every part of the cigars that are being made, every part of the pre-industry and the post-industry. They have to consider all of it. And unfortunately for them, they're not the brands, and they're the behind the scenes guys. They may be the blenders of the liquor companies, or whatever corollary examples, but they're tremendous. And a guy like Raul, there's a a lot of the success at Knox, I believe, can be attributed to Raul. It takes a tremendous amount of skill set to run a factory, dealing with all of the terrible issues that can come of that, and figuring it all out, and basically allowing the blends that people like Steve or myself or whomever that we fancy to actually come to life.
Yeah.
And consistently come to life in a day in and day out fashion. So, Raul's name is on the bottom of every one of our boxes that come out of Noxie. People don't see it, but his name is on the bottom of every one of our boxes. It's just a little bit of what we can do to give credit where credit is due.
Yeah, I absolutely. And like you mentioned that the I wouldn't call it a challenge, but you mentioned the fact that you don't have the Cuban heritage, you don't have the family lineage in it, other than the story of your dad. And Raul has a very interesting story in that regard too, because like Raul's, he started in the fields when he was a teenager, and then worked his way up to the esteem that we're talking about. But he's a little fish out of water too, because he's not Cuban. He's actually Dominican in Nicaragua. So I think
that's why it works so well.
Yeah.
I think having that difference of experience and difference of mentality.
Yeah.
I think that works really well. And having combinations where you take a combination with like a Oliva tobacco family with an extreme history and growing tobacco all over the world and fermenting tobacco, and then you have an experience of a guy like Gustavo Cura, who has a tremendous operational experience and tremendous tobacco knowledge, and the knowledge of a guy like Raul, having worked in the pre-industry and the post-industry, and having worked for many brands, and both Dominican and Nicaraguan. I think when you get all those elements kind of together, it creates some magical things. And then you bring in people like Steve Sacco, who have tremendous experience on the retail side of things, as well as the manufacturing side of stuff. It takes a lot of different elements to make what happen there. And I think all of those things were really fortunate, all the people that aligned there.
We're going to come back to a couple more of your brands here in a second. We're going to take a quick break and have some fun with some of our fun segments, as I like to call them. And the first one, of course, is our presidential trivia segment, which I warned you about, and which is always brought to you by United Cigars, featuring La Giana Havana, distributors of Jose Dominguez, Bandolero Garofalo, Firecracker, and the highly acclaimed Atabey, Byron, and now Alfonso lines from Selected Tobacco. Smoke one today and start living united. So, Ian, here's your question. I told you I was going to try to tie it in as much as possible. So, this dapper future president, while serving in the military, designed his own uniform, which would later be adopted by the military. Now, I specifically didn't do the branch because I figured that might give it away. But this dapper future president, while serving in the military, designed his own uniform, which would later be adapted by the U.S. military. So your choices are A, Ulysses S. Grant, B, Dwight D. Eisenhower, C, George Washington, or D, Andrew Jackson.
Wow. I'm going to be honest with you and tell you, I don't have any clue other than the fact that my leaning would be towards that's a tough one, man. Maybe this shouldn't be that tough. I mean, my leaning would be towards Ulysses Grant, maybe, or let's see. Think about that. I'm gonna go Eisenhower. Let's go Eisenhower.
I'm glad you second guessed it, man. You got it right. Yeah, you got it right. So there was a list of most fashionable presidents and least fashionable presidents, and Ulysses S. Grant was actually near the bottom. So you guessed right. So Dwight D. Eisenhower, before he was president, was actually a pretty big trendsetter. So he was really dissatisfied with the field jackets that he had to wear during World War II. So back in your grandfather's day. So and he decided to design one himself. So he wanted a new jacket that was short but comfortable, and in what in quotations, was very natty looking, whatever the fuck that means. But he staggered adjustable cuff buttons and waist buttons and waist buckles to allow a looser fit that was but good for warmer conditions. So
Wow.
he also had some pleats that extended from the shoulder to the waistband, providing increased range of motion. So it was later deemed the Ike jacket, and it would go on to be adopted by the U.S. Army, and so that's actually what the U.S. military wore up through up until the Vietnam War era. So
I had no idea.
Yeah, good guess. So
It was a good guess, right? I was thinking every photo I've ever seen of the Ulysses Grant seemed to be pretty noble looking.
Yeah. I don't know why. Granted, I mean, I don't necessarily trust the validity of some of these lists sometimes, but it's like, but this list did get it right though, because Harry Truman was number one. Harry Truman, I had this question before on the list. I didn't want to bring it back because I actually had it before. Harry S. Truman's considered the most fashionable president because he actually was a haberdasher before he became, he went into politics. He actually owned a haberdashery in Kansas City. Yeah. So like he was very partial to double-breasted suits with, very large peaked lapels and, actually he was before his time because his suit, he was president in the late 40s, right? His suits actually became quite the rage in the 1960s. So yeah, they just became like slimmer fits.
Right.
They were like his designs and stuff like that. So he also owned 96 pairs of shoes.
That's a good amount.
Yeah. So
he's a sneakerhead.
Yeah. So yeah, him and James Brown would get along just fine. Yeah. So,
that's
which
cool.
Which included apparently 41 pairs of slippers, which guy liked to kick back too, apparently. So
yeah,
good stuff.
Yeah.
Good stuff. So that was our United Presidential Trivia segment, brought to you by United Cigars, featuring La Gian Havan and distributors of Jose Dominguez, Bandolero Garofalo, the Firecracker, then the highly acclaimed Atabey Byron, and now Alfonso lines from Selected Tobacco. Smoke one today and start living united. So our next segment, and before we go back into some of your brands, Ian, is this segment that I love on the show. In October, on my birthday, it'll be the 3rd anniversary. So we'll have done this for 3 years. So we've almost done this for 3 years now, where my guest each week picks a nonprofit or charity of their choosing to spotlight. And this one's got an interesting tie-in because you've actually done a project for them. Your latest release is the Holy Smoke Genesis. And it's made for the Holy Smokes group, and you can check out more at holysmoke.org. But what was really interesting to me as I was reading about this is you were a little hesitant at first to do something, but something inside of you or something was that you had to do it. So I'd love to hear a little bit more about this project and about the group.
Yeah. So, the reason I picked the group is, not only because we did a cigar for them, but that a lot of it started out of Fresno, where I'm based, and it was a group of cigar smokers that I knew very well, and they had over the years, the past few years, it started this biblical study, and the biblical study, call it like an hour men's get together. They would do these in the cigar shops, and they would invite people from cigars and non-cigars. But it was like a men's fellowship, men's kind of gathering. And there's obviously biblical components to it, but I think more than just the biblical pieces of it, it was about, helping men out in various, parts of their life, in all sorts of phases. And so it started out of Fresno, and
you're where you live. That's cool.
Yes. Okay. Yeah. And that's why I really did that for him, because I got involved in it, because it started out of Fresno. It started with guys that I knew, and there was a lot of guys that were cigar smokers that I knew that became members of this group and passionate about it, and that it had grown and a little bit to other areas, and they were looking to do cigar that, because the whole theme and the whole setting place was cigars. That's where you were getting together at a cigar shop most of the time, sometimes in people's backyards and sometimes in churches and whatnot. But it was kind of centered around, the time and duration of how long the fellowship kind of lasts was about the time it took to smoke a cigar. And so I thought it was a really unique concept. And when they came to me, they said they really wanted to make a cigar that, would fundraise for their organization, but they wanted it to be really, they just wanted it to be a good cigar. And they came to me saying, we really want you to make a great cigar for this. And we want people to be really proud and whatnot of it. And so when I saw how committed they were towards, not really cutting any corners on it. It wasn't just about throwing a little band on there, and it just wasn't about me giving them some cigar and saying that's going to be your cigar. And they were really, really intent on making the best product they could. That's what really kind of sold me on. Okay, well, we'll go down this path, and I'll do everything I can to make this the best looking product that I could possibly make for them, and the best smoking, presentation and all that stuff. And so that's we got involved probably about 3 years ago, and it took a bit of time because COVID got into the mix, and so that kind of slowed things down a lot from the perspective of printing things and making cigars, etc. But we just released a cigar about a month before the trade show, and it's done really well. It's a limited edition first cigar that we did with them, and it was so successful that they want to do subsequent cigars, and we've raised a decent amount of money for it. And it's something I'm really proud of from the perspective of how it came out and how it appears and the whole bit. So yeah, it's been an interesting thing.
Yeah, our podcast listeners later won't be able to see this, but I pulled up the image of the Holy Smoke Genesis, which is the Bible Study Cigar Club and everything. And yeah, I mean, you're right. I haven't smoked a cigar yet, but holy cow, man, this packaging is lights out. I mean,
yeah, it's really beautiful. The cigar is a box press figurado, a San Andres wrapper, Nicaraguan fillers. The packaging is, I think, it's remarkable. I'll have to send you a couple in the mail as well, so you can give them a go. They're from a blend perspective, I always tell people, the organization, while it is cigar, there are cigar components, so it's not a cigar organization. So part of blending a cigar had to be about making something that's kind of approachable. So it's like we couldn't really make cigars that were exceptionally high nicotine, and we had to make something very approachable for a wide audience and make something very beautiful. So I was really I'm really proud of how that came out. It's done well, and there'll be subsequent cigars to that. So
okay.
Yeah, so it's a cool thing.
I'm going to tread lightly here but I'm just interested. I happen to be a religious person, so and of a Christian background and everything. So this group in particular, is really fascinating to me. And you can go to holysmoke.org. The website is down, but they do have a video for anyone interested in the organization. It's the organizers. It's these three gentlemen that are talking about the organization, its intent, and for anyone out there who's again, I'm treading light here. For anyone out there who may be turned off by religion because of maybe overzealous people that they've experienced or overzealousness they've experienced in their life, these guys are not it. Like, it's a very laid back group of guys from everything I can tell, and they're sitting there smoking cigars, and they're talking about just getting folks together and just having open discussion and openness and open forum and everything. So it's really cool from everything that I can see, and it's a really looks like a really terrific organization. So I'm glad you were drawn to it, and ultimately put together what looks like a fantastic project and everything.
It's grown tremendous. I'll say this. So I'm sad the website isn't done. I know that they're going through a really big website thing. But I have tracked them for the last few years, and it's grown tremendously. They have organizations all across the country now. And the charitable money that we generate from the cigar sales actually goes towards the chapters that go to starting in various parts of the country. I
Oh,
don't
very
know
cool.
all of those areas, but there are many, many chapters all around the country now that have their own Holy Smoke groups that deal with the same thing. And they develop a lot of the curriculum, or I don't want to say curriculum, literature, or whatnot, that helps give topics to these weekly meetings and things. And they have a tremendous network of guys that talk together from all across the country. And what really resonates to me, and I don't focus too much on the religious element of it, I focus more on the element of what I've heard of from local people here that are not religious, but were in bad parts of their life, that went to these groups to get camaraderie and help from fellow people.
Oh, wow.
It's really pulled a lot of people out of bad situations to let them know that there are people there that can help, and that and I think the cigars, and I think their tone of the religiousness really is appealing, meaning I don't think that they're trying to thump anybody in the head with the Bible per se.
Yeah.
But trying to invite them in a loving manner, and in a group that is very open and talking about very a large amount of topics. So it's been hopefully they'll get this. I think it's going to come up soon, their new revamped website. But yeah, you can go to holysmokeusa.org, and it will they'll have a little video introduction of what the group is about. There's a lot of members, and there's a lot of great people that are a part of it. I'm super happy that I'm able to make them a product that does it justice, and hopefully brings good light to their organization.
Awesome. You recently had an event earlier this summer too, where you were with the cigar and stuff. So yeah.
They did a huge event. There was a gentleman on the board of that his name is Chris Rogenstein. He's a very nice guy, and he believes a lot in the project as well. And he threw a tremendous grand opening party for the cigar and everything. And so that happened the 1st of July. It was a great event, and we were able to raise a lot of money through sales of cigars and swag and other stuff for that. But yeah, it's a great organization, and I can't wait to see how they grow that in the future. And I'm flattered that they came. There's a lot of people that they could have, and they know this, that they could have made the cigars with, and that could have done the same thing for them. So I'm very I'm flattered and a bit honored that they entrusted us to make the cigar.
We'll go with the hometown kid. That works.
I guess
that works. Yeah, that's awesome. Well, check it out. holysmokeusa.org. I'll post that later in the show notes, and check them out, because it's a great organization. So Ian, thank you so much for bringing that to attention and working with them. It's great. Getting back to your brands that we haven't really dived into. I just finished the Desfilito, which was incredible. Really enjoyed that cigar. Holy cow. Just really nice flavors. The retrohale was I love long retrohales, long finish. With the spice component to it didn't really kick in until like very, very, very end of that long finish too. So it wasn't like this huge spice bomb that goes through your nose, but the lingeringness of it really kind of just balanced out the flavors of that cigar, and it was just a fantastic experience. I've since lent up the Siempre Sun Grown.
Okay.
This is another one of your cigars. This is my first one. What was it about, or tell us a little bit about this project and how it came to pass.
Yeah, I mean, Siempre Sun Grown is it's really the roots of the combination of tobacco that's used is based on what Frank Anessa used to do, and these are all passed down to me through my friend Gustavo Cura. And Gus told me, he was like, you really ought to consider doing things that are in the combination with Sumatra and broadleaf, because he had become very good friends with Frank Anessa through his life, and Frank had built a tremendous business and a tremendous empire in terms of the cigar community. He's when you Google Frank Anessa cigars, I mean, this guy was the the Nestor or the Rocky or whatever.
Yeah, architect, man, of some very iconic brands. Yeah, he's an
Very
icon.
And one of his really good go-to combinations of cigars, of tobacco for cigars, is combining Ecuadorian Sumatra with a Connecticut broadleaf. And that combination really is a magical combination. It gives you a lot of smoke production. It gives you some sweetness. It gives you some earthiness. It gives you a lot of interesting flavor notes. It's not overpowering. And he built a hell of a business on his blending prowess for blending medium-bodied cigars, for blending cigars that were very approachable. The old saying with Frank Anessa was that he wanted to make cigars that when you smoke that cigar, halfway through the cigar, you touch your pocket to make sure you got the next one so you can light that one up. It was that delightful and that enjoyable. So part of Siempre Sungrown was being able to, okay, well, what can we take with a Sumatra broadleaf combination that was appealing to me? Now, Frank had also used a lot of Honduran fillers back in the day. And so obviously that didn't make a whole lot of sense from my perspective if I'm trying to do something out of Nicaragua. But we did use some Honduran filler in it. And we tried to create a blend that was maybe something that was like that enjoyable experience that Frank was so adamant about, but maybe give it a little bit of spice and maybe a little bit of tinge of Nicaraguan, so that you knew that maybe that wasn't something that was just Honduran based or something. So the Siempre Sungrown is really influenced by what Frank Anessa did with his blends, and so that's how that cigar came about.
Yeah, the cigar that would later bear his name was one of his last projects. He actually finally put his name on it, Frank Anessa cigars. And those, when I first started smoking, I got a hold of some. Still have one tucked away that I probably will never smoke because it's my last one, and it's so good. It was so good. And like you said, there is a lot of, I can take, like, as you talk about, I can taste some of that influence in this cigar too, particularly that Honduran tobacco that you talk about. There's a nice earthy quality to this that really balances out some of these other flavors that you're describing. And that's that Honduran tobacco that really, really does that. And there are Honduran cigars that are like, that are, I would say, that are pretty refined. The reputation of Honduran tobacco is that it is very dank. It is very earthy, and it certainly is. But when used appropriately, which I feel like this cigar is showcasing so far, like, it really adds a really nice balancing component to some really, really flavorful other, more, I guess, flavor forward, I guess, tobaccos is probably the best way I can put it, or at least articulate it. Is there plans to expand this, like, similarly to like the El Borracho or the Desfilido or even La Madrina?
It's weird because we don't really have right now any plans on the Siempre side of things. I do notice that there's a lot of people kind of doing Sumatra stuff these days, and that's kind of nice because I've always liked Sumatra. I mean, Jeremy at Wildfire, we kind of shared a booth next to each other. He gave me a Sumatra that he had just released. I thought it was a great Sumatra. Nick Malilo's Sumatra he just released. It's just outstanding.
Matapo, yeah.
Oh, it's just outstanding Sumatra cigar. And the stuff that Pete makes with Sumatra, I love that stuff.
Dig it. Oh man, I dig when Pete works with Sumatra. I love recanting this story to him, and when I tell him, like, I remember one of the first times I interviewed him, and I was at a cigar shop, and I was telling someone that I was interviewing Pete, and I was like, yeah, I'm going to be smoking the Capa Especial. I love when Pete works, and he was releasing some limited at the time that was the Sumatra, It's like I love when Pete works with Sumatra, and man, it was like I fucking called down the fire on this guy, and this guy got so mad. He's like, no, he is a broadleaf guy. He makes broadleaf, and his broadleaf is the best. I was like, whoa, dude, I didn't say his broadleaf sucked. I just said I really like when he works with Sumatra. It just became this thing. It was like
Sacrilege.
gosh, sweet Jesus, Batman. My God, like calm the hell down. Like, but that's what's great about this industry. People get really passionate about blenders and what they work with and stuff. So
Pete is, and I would argue back with this guy that Pete is an outstanding blender. And whether he's working with broadleaf, Habano from Ecuador, Sumatra, or San Andreas.
Yeah, even Mexico now, especially with the Tuxtla and stuff. Yeah.
There are cigars in all of those formats and all of those varieties that I think are outstanding. And you know, so I couldn't tell you, like, you know, I couldn't tell you what I mean. I think that he could blend with whatever you give him a leaf, it's going to be, and he's going to crank out a stellar cigar at some point using that leaf. So yeah, I mean, I'm with you on that one. His Sumatra, I loved it when
he's a pretty big fan of yours. So in light of the fact that he'll probably see this later, I will be, Pete, I am going to mention this. You know, we are shouting you out and giving you accolade for your tremendous blending style. But yes, I'll go ahead and say it, Pete. It's because of Pepin and Jaime. Okay. He always gives credit to his father and brother-in-law. You know, he always does. Yeah, without fail. He always takes a backseat to them and stuff. And yes, they do their great things and everything like that. But Pete, you are a great blender. Just Ian and I are saying it, and that's okay. So,
hey, look, I mean, from my perspective, Pete's a you know, very nice person, very nice to me, and I have the fortunate circumstance of being able to tell people that, you know, it's guys like him that paved the path for me being able to do what I'm doing. You know, he's really, you know, I mean, yes, we talk about guys like Frank Anessa and the Olivas and everybody in the old school realm of tobacco, but from my generation, in my time coming in and smoking, Pete's kind of one of our rock stars.
Oh, 1,000%.
And so yeah, I mean, it's I'm so incredibly fortunate to be able to get the ear of somebody like that every once in a while. But I also know his portfolio real well because it's a point of admiration with like a lot of the guys that I talk about. You know, you're surrounded by guys that are just amazing at what they're doing with cigars. Really amazing stuff. You know,
I was a part of an interesting discussion earlier this year with some friends of mine in the media. They just happened to be in the media space, and we were talking about the generations of blenders and stuff. And you mentioned like Frank and you know, people like him and Benji Menendez are part of that. Like when I started smoking, they were the old guard, and I guess they're the ultra old guard. You know, you know, Fuente, Padron, Plasencia, etc. Right. And then you have people like Pete, like you mentioned, that were kind of these next generation, like Pete, you know, and John Huber, Jonathan Drew, you know, George Rico, Dion, you know, they were like they were the young guns, the next generation. And there was like this tweener stage, I call it, but it was mostly guys like Steve and Nick, you know. But we specifically named you and a few other of your colleagues that have kind of been in the last 10 years, in this last decade, that you guys are going to be the ones that carry that torch to the next generation, whatever that looks like. And that's, you know, I mean, that's some impressive company. And because, I mean, you've really put together an amazing portfolio of just outstanding cigars.
I mean, I appreciate that. I think, you know, from, you know, it's very humble to be uttered in the same breath as a lot of the people you spoke of. You know, I'm good friends with Nick and Steve, and I look up to them. I tell them, I shouldn't even be in the same conversation as these guys, because these guys have been doing this longer than I have.
Sure.
And they are, they're tremendous at what they do. Tremendous. I don't think there's both of them, Steve and Nick. They're both tremendous. Nick is an outstanding. He's an outstanding blender and a tobacco person, and he's also an incredible branding person. And Steve equally has a tremendous amount of marketing knowledge, as well as some of the production knowledge. So these guys are, it's very flattering that I would even be in the same sentence. But yeah, you're right. Guys like John Huber, guys, Tim Ozinger, when I started smoking cigars, Tim Ozinger was a rock star. Matter of fact, I probably blame Tim Ozinger and all that crazy stuff that they did with CAO to. I always blame them as having ruined it for all of us, because we can never throw events as big as what CAO was doing from a marketing and branding perspective.
1,000%. It's crazy.
It was unbelievable.
Yeah. Unbelievable what they did with marketing. John had a lot to do with that too, and he certainly has carried that over. It's crazy. Yeah, and to have someone like Tim come back to the industry last year is such a blessing in a lot of ways. I did want to ask you though. We've mentioned Steve a couple of times tonight, and you having such a close relationship with him is funny. Have you adopted some of his self-deprecating style that he has, or have you kind of stayed away from that? I find that his self-deprecating style to be very comical. Where he's like, well, I don't know if anyone's ever going to buy my cigars. They're not very good. I'm like, dude, just stop, man. Just stop.
Steve's the greatest marketer. He's like one of the greatest marketers on earth.
Yeah.
I try to separate the side that I know Steve from and his business side of it, because I think they're just two separate things per se. But God, if you could come up with a track record for somebody in the cigar business, that I think maybe what I like about it is that I feel maybe in some sense that he maybe has no purpose of being in the cigar business per se. It's not like Steve's grandfather was a tobacco farmer in Cuba. It's not like he comes from, a pedigree of, maybe he does, maybe, I don't know. Maybe there's a long lineage.
I don't think so. I think it was just he just was a nerd like us.
And so that's the part that to come from a similar perspective and a similar part outside of the industry, and then to do what he's done. Wow. I mean, it's like I kind of equate it to like bands. If you make one hit record, boy, that could be it. That's it. Like you should be proud that you made one hit record. Yeah. But to hit on multiple times, and to hit being what he did with JR, to hit what he did at Drew Estate, and to now do what he's doing at Dunbarton, that's certainly very skillful. And he's obviously a very, very smart guy. He's obviously a very talented guy in many perspectives to do those things. Yeah,
he's had quite the career, and in a lot of ways, I feel like he's still just getting started, which is kind of scary at the same time. But
I kind of feel like that too. I kind of feel like he's finding his element right now or something.
Yeah, exactly. So now to get back to Dapper, I thought was with like the El Borracho line, we've mentioned it a couple times tonight, but I thought it was really interesting that you have two offerings, which would, and I know you tried to get away with this, and this is why you kind of rebranded them, but it's, and I apologize. I'm not trying to confuse people more, because I know that this was something you wanted to steer away from, but it's kind of like your Maduro lines. Like you have the El Borracho broadleaf, and you have the El Borracho San Andreas. So was there I guess during the blending process or the branding process of the El Borracho, why was that such a concern, I guess, of confusion that you wanted to do it?
I'll be honest with you. Many of the things that we've done are a reflection of me just not knowing what the fuck I'm doing sometimes. And El Borracho was that was a great thing. There's a lot of lessons I've learned over the years, and many of the lessons have to be with clarity in products. And, you know, when I did the El Borracho line originally, we originally named them kind of in that natural Maduro framing because we were in that FDA mode. And there was a lot of bad decisions that we made to try to overthink what we thought the FDA was going to do. And we were just kind of playing that for survival. And when we did the San Andreas version, I had also blended a broadleaf version. I really loved the broadleaf version. And I just thought at the time, okay, no problem. We'll call the San Andreas one the natural, and we'll call the broadleaf one the Maduro, because that's what the shades of the wrapper is more reflected. And nobody's going to care. It's fine. It's a terrible idea. It's created a lot of confusion. And so subsequently, we've changed the naming so that the natural version is the San Andreas version. So, you know, you get the San Andreas wrap cigar, and the broadleaf one, the Maduro one became the broadleaf one. So, you know, you get the broadleaf one. There's still a lot of changes that are coming forward that will cause even better clarity in branding. But yeah, the reason we did that was not because it was a good reason. It was based on some bad ideas, as well as some unrealistic thoughts about what would end up becoming survivable after the FDA. I wish we'd never done that, but yeah.
I've heard you talk about the quote unquote survival period that you mentioned a moment ago a couple of times in other interviews, and you had some pretty harsh criticism of yourself. You talked about how you lost a lot of time, you feel like, you know, by
I made all the wrong decisions during that time. I made during the time when the FDA rules were announced, there was a lot of fear. And this was, you know, to try to put people into that perspective, just to give people an idea. I think that's why you have so many new small brands that are coming out, because people remember there was a lot of brands that just decided, you know, we're not even going to go down the path of trying to deal with any of this compliance. And we, unfortunately, you know, I'd started the company in the period that was considered the period that you weren't predicated. None of your products were predicated. Our entire company was built outside of the predicate cutoff.
2007 was the date. Yeah, it was a harsh cutoff. My God.
Harsh cutoff. And so the only thing that I could rely on, or the only thing that I could go, okay, well, one, do we just close up shop? We had three decisions. We had three paths we could go down. The first path was, it's over, fellas. We'll sell out everything we got. We'll wind it down. We'll see what happens. And then whatever happens, happens. We didn't do that. The second path was, you know what? Fuck these guys. We're just going to keep doing what we're going to do. And whatever happens, happens. That would have been the best path. The third path was, well, let's see what we can do to our products so that we can have the best chance of survival. And what that meant was, okay, can we work with our partners, and do our partners have predicated brands? Yes, they do. Fortunately, Noxa and Oliva Tobacco had been making cigars for a very long time. So they had predicated sizes, they had predicated formats, they had all these things. Okay, well, what can we do to work with that? So there was a lot of concessions, to the point to where, you know, we were using sizes. Like our Toro was like a 5.6 by 54, because that blend that we had for some of the sizes was aligned with a predicated brand that they had on the books, that we could then tell the FDA, hey, wink, wink, this is the same cigar as the other one. We just named it different. That was the thought. The thought was that. And yeah, I'm not saying, like, you know, that maybe there's a lot of people that are like, oh, that's dumb, that'd never work, or whatever. Well, you know, these strategies weren't like,
they didn't give you a lot of guidance, Ian. Let's just be fair. It's like,
well, not only they gave it guidance, but we had very expensive FDA attorneys that were kind of steering us to what was okay and what was not okay. And they were kind of going, well, you can do this, but you can't do that. And they're finding this stuff and guessing too. And so we spent a period of 3 years going down this path of spending a lot of money on attorneys, which was wasted, spending a lot of money on trying to comply and do all the FDA registrations, which turned out to be worth nothing really at the end of the day. And then also worse than all of that, we were just constantly trying to develop our brands within the framework of where these attorneys said that we could exist. And so that also was detrimental because we couldn't do what we really wanted to do the way that we wanted to do it. And so having gone through all that, and then the correction of all of those things afterwards was, it's still things that we're kind of hung over from, right? It took a long time for us to get all of our sizing to be consistent across our brands again. And for us to come out with new brands and for us to, keep going. So yeah, I have always felt like we've lost 3 to 5 years of momentum that I regret in some respect. And I feel like we could have gotten ahead a lot further had I not been so cautious. But it is what it is, lesson learned. And that was just, it was some bad decisions on my part that I wish I would have done a little bit differently, but there it is, live and learn, right?
Yeah, some corrections coming. So, and I think the rebranding, really did a good job. It was really well received last year when you decided to put those out. But I mean, one thing that you got after this kind of, I guess, this period and everything was the release of La Madrina, and specifically its counterpart.
Yeah.
The La Madrina shade, which I absolutely freaking love. I think it's fantastic. And you said, I think I heard you correctly when we started the show tonight that you said it's the best-selling line for you.
Yeah, so it's funny, and we even made mistakes with that. We La Madrina became our best-selling cigar for whatever reason. It just became our best-selling line, and so much so that it stuck out. During COVID, we were actually, during that period, we were like, well, we need to have a shade cigar back on the market. And La Madrina just makes sense for which brand that we should do the shade. But because of the backlog in printing, we couldn't even get the printables for La Madrina for the shade to get there. So we finally just at some point decided, screw it. We're just going to release the La Madrina shade, but we're just going to use the same bands and the same everything. And we'll just put a shade sticker, like the Fuente does with their little, or whatever, you put the Maduro sticker, you put the Sunground sticker, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And we thought, oh, that's fine. That was a terrible idea. It was a terrible decision. One, everybody that loved it, they didn't know which one they loved. I don't know, it's a shade one or the Habano or what was it? So they had no idea. And two, by the time we got the printables, the shade printables, all of a sudden that brand just skyrocketed. It was like all of a sudden it became like, oh my God, everybody wants just the shade version because they knew that was the white banded version. And so yeah, even in that perspective, that's a lesson learned. We won't do that again. We'll definitely make sure our packaging between lines is distinguishable enough so that if you at least save the band, you knew at least what line you were in, or what wrapper shade you were in.
The caricature of the skeleton hand with the flower is interesting as well too. Like, what went into that choice? Because
yeah, that didn't start out with that brand. It was much more morbid looking, and it was much more. There was even a point in which there was a Grim Reaper on the band, and it really took a lot of iterations. And it's 100% due to Dan Greta, our designer of everything. It took some iterations, and what we came out with was what I think is probably our most iconic look to this day, or iconic band, is that La Madrina, the skeleton hand and the rose. And it was really about what were we trying to convey? What imagery, what the kind of juxtaposition between the beauty of life and the fatality of death kind of thing, right? Having
it's pretty deep.
Yeah, and that's kind of what ended up coming up out of it. And I always say, like, I was very heavily inspired by what John Huber did with the Las Calaveras. I thought that imagery and what he had done in the kind of Dias de los Muertes kind of theme, I just loved it. I was like, man, we have to do our own take on this, but not overtly rip it off, per se. And I thought that came out real well. And it just serendipitously now it's a good cigar as well. Don't get me wrong. I mean, I love the blend. I smoke the shade all the time. But certainly, that I don't know if any of it was designed and purposeful. We didn't sit down from day one and go, this is going to be our best selling one. And this is how it's going to look. And this is what it's going to turn out to be,
Remember smoking that cigar for like the first time, and I was suffering for some pretty bad allergies at the moment, so my throat was really scratchy and everything. It was just drainage and stuff. But sorry for the vividness of that imagery. But I was like, I need something a little bit more softer on the palate, and I was like, oh, I'll smoke the La Madrina Connecticut or shade, so that surely it will. But man, that thing had some giddy up, and I just remember like, this wasn't the best choice, but God, this is good. Damn, this is good.
Maybe I shouldn't have chose that.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I got you 100%. It's that's the other thing too, is how do you shade cigars are obviously a huge percentage of the market. And I'll be honest with you, the whole reason we also did that shade was because of Nick Perdomo. I was spending some time with Nick Perdomo, and he's always been such a very, he shouldn't give me advice, but he does, and like, there's no reason, there's a lot of, in cigar business, there's a lot of, there's competition. Everybody's fighting for the same shelf space, and everybody's trying to do the same thing. And I was just really amazed at just how generous he was with, advice. And we were down in Nika, and he was telling me, he was like, well, let me ask you something. He goes, how many cigars do you have? And I said, well, I've got, 10 blends or whatever. He goes, okay. And he's like, how many shade cigars do you have? I'm like, at that time, I had none. We discontinued the Tubo Claro. Well, none right now. He's like, in some extent, he's like, you're an idiot. I'm like, well, how do you figure? Well, X percentage of the US cigar market, or even the global market, is the shade wrap cigar. So by you not having a shade cigar, you've immediately excluded like 70% of your buying audience. And I was like, yeah, you are right. I am an idiot. That's a really dumb thing. So it was like, all right, we have to make a shade cigar, and why not leverage our best-selling brand at the time? So that's how that came about.
Nice. I had Nick's son on last week as part of my show, and him and I were lamenting about how the influence that Nick has had on this industry for going back, I mean, decades now. Like, we were talking about CAO. He did production for CAO after they lost their factory in Costa Rica at the time, and he also, was instrumental in helping Drew, his dad had a lot to do with it, but instrumental in getting Drew Estate off the ground. And Dave Garofalo and him go way back too, and there's a history there. And so it's crazy what the impact that he has, and he's done he's done it very quietly, and he's very quiet about it. He doesn't brag about it and everything, but he's so important. He's so important to the industry, and what he's done, the influence, like even in conversations that he's had with folks like you said, is competition. And yet, he's still this wealth of knowledge that he continues to pour out and everything. What
he is a force of nature. I don't think people understand just how much of a force of nature he is. He is incredibly sharp. He's an incredibly sharp guy. He's a very, very smart guy, and he knows his operations in and out. He's built a tremendously large, vertically integrated operation.
Oh yeah.
And Yeah, he maybe doesn't get as much credit as he should for that, but yeah, he's a force. He's just incredible. Yeah.
We're talking about the symbolism with the La Madrina. I remember seeing a picture of a guy who actually got the La Madrina symbol tattooed somewhere.
It's by far, yeah. Yeah.
It's that's that kind of fandom is that's gotta be surreal.
It's unnerving. We have more people tattoo that logo on them than any brand. I mean, and I'm not just talking about one or two. Every month we have somebody send us some photo of tattoo somewhere.
That's
and
crazy.
It's a little unnerving because part of me is like, as my own thing, I'm like, well, we can't change the brand. Like you immediately will dissuade a customer if you ever touch that sacred design. But also, to me, it's a incredible lesson about powers of brands.
Yeah.
And guys like Steve know this as well. Things like a Liga Privada, there are just things like Opus X. They're not to say that we're on the same level at all, but certain brands resonate really, really well with consumers for whatever reasons. And it's inspiring. I think any cigar maker, like, you're basically hunting and trying to find just one of those brands in your lifetime that you can be a part of that will hopefully be so popular that it will cause people to tattoo them on them and things like that.
Well, I heard you talk about this one time about how, like, again, harkening back to your dad's days of smoking, like, again, in his case, there were no bands, there was no brand, he was just smoking cigars just to enjoy them. But that was his choice, right? But he wasn't very different from the market back then. The cigar smoker, in the 90s and even early 2000s were very brand loyal. They were the guys, and they still exist. I mean, they're still probably a majority of the market. They're not my audience. They're not our audience necessarily, but they're the people that go into the humidor once a day, 3 times a week, a couple times a month, and they go in and they buy a handful or that one cigar every time, and that's their cigar. And that's, again, in this next generation of cigar makers that you're a part of, that's what, one day that'll be you.
I mean, we hope you're right. Like, we hope for that, but you're also right in the saying that the consumer has shifted tremendously. I think it's harder today.
Oh,
because,
yeah.
I mean, I don't, if we make what I consider, like, if we took our best selling brand, like the La Madrina Shade, and we even get it to be tattooed on somebody and they love it and resonate with it so much, I have no doubt in my mind that guy's not just smoking that. That guy's smoking a lot of things. There's a lot of great things. We're just hoping that brand makes it in their wheelhouse. We're just hoping that we're in one of those slots in his humidor so that every once in a while he goes, yep, I'm smoking that one today. And that's, I think, our best hope for consumers today, because they're not like my father. They're not guys that are like, I am smoking this all the time because I like this and I've already found it and this is all I'm smoking and I'm happy with it. I mean, God bless those guys. Whenever you come across them, you love it because you're like, all right, we're going to move some cigars to that guy. But they're just far and few between, I think, today.
Yeah. Well, like, even me, for example, like, I went into the humidor at Paladin today and I bought Dapper, Tatuaje, Gran Habano. And I smoke a lot of cigars, and there's certain cigars that I would consider my daily smoke is different than the layman's daily smoke, because what I consider my daily smoke, I probably smoke a few times a month because I'm just smoking so much. Like, I smoke a lot of different things in the market, and that's the Ian, can you hear me?
Yep, I hear you.
Okay, sorry, I lost you there for a second. But yeah, that's I think that's you're right. That is the guy going into the humidor now is going to grab a bunch of this, a bunch of that, or one or two or things here and there and stuff. So, well, great. Well, listen, that's kind of going to go lead us into our last few questions of the night. And Ian, I thank you so much for your time tonight.
Yeah.
And we have some fun more segments just to wrap up tonight's evening. This is more of our rapid fire segment. I call it this or that. And it's pretty simple. I give you two choices and you just pick one. So,
All right.
so, and so some are cigar related, some are not. You know, some have a little bit more or a little bit deeper, some are not. So it's just all over the place. So let's start with something that's cigar related. So would you gravitate more towards box press or a traditional parejo?
Traditional prayer.
Pacific Coast cuisine or Gulf Coast cuisine? So I know you spend time in both.
I'm gonna go Gulf Coast cuisine. New Orleans is my favorite place on earth to eat.
All right. What's like one of your go-tos when you go there? What's a dish? Or
it's so specific that like we've got restaurants that we go to just for the specific dish. Like, you know, we'll go to Mr. B's for the soft shell, you know, fried crabs. It's sick. It's really sick. I am in the category that was ecstatic to hear the PCA going back to New Orleans.
I might have to follow you around, man, because I have to admit I'm a little lost in that city sometimes. But because I know there is such great food, but I want to get off of Bourbon Street. I want to get away from the tourism. And so if you know some spots, that's great.
I know lots of spots. We got a great list. Trust me, we'll take care of you there.
Sounds good. All right. So speaking of travel, would you rather visit the Taj Mahal or the Colosseum in Rome?
I'm probably going to go Colosseum. Yeah.
All right. Jeans or slacks?
Definitely going jeans.
Okay. You have a specific color? Do you like the good classic, the denim blue?
I'm a traditionalist. I have an affinity for Levi's.
Levi's. Oh man, classics. All right. I should have asked this question before. Do you have a nut allergy?
I don't.
Okay, good. So crunchy peanut butter or creamy smooth peanut butter?
I'm kind of on the skippy side, creamy smooth.
All right. Which is the right side for anyone else listening or anyone else who cares, because crunchy peanut butter is just weird. I'll say it. I don't care. It's fucking weird. All right. Let's go back to where you live now. Fresno State football or Fresno State basketball?
Fresno State football.
Okay. Have you been to a lot of football games?
Yeah, I'm a season ticket holder for.
Oh, okay. All right.
Yeah.
Awesome. I know you got kids. Do you take them to the game? Do you take them to the games?
Yeah, it's a family ordeal.
Oh, it's terrific.
One of the few things that we enjoy about Fresno State is the football.
All right. Want a little twist on this because this is about kids. I've got two boys, and I would love to have more kids one day. So I thought this would be a fun question. Let's take you back to the age you started having children.
Okay.
Here are your choices. You can have the same amount of kids you have now, or you can have more kids.
Oh, that's a good one. I'm happy with the amount of kids I have now. I wish I would have started a little earlier. That's something you'll never hear.
No, I actually feel the same way. I really do. I really do. I really wish I had started earlier. And yeah, because I want more kids. So yeah, I want more kids though. Even though you're happy with this, but yeah, I wish I could have more kids. I wouldn't be opposed to that. It's not in the cards per se, but I wouldn't have mind starting earlier. And I did start. I felt like I started pretty young comparatively to a lot of folks. I started at 26, but I would have no qualms going back in time and starting earlier. How many kids do you have?
I have two boys.
You have two boys too? Oh, okay, cool. Yeah. Awesome. My oldest just turned 8, and then I have a 3-year-old who's about to turn 4 in October. So
And may I ask how old are you?
I'm 39. So
Oh, so I'm 41. My oldest is 15 now.
okay.
So, yeah, they're 3 years apart. But I wouldn't have any qualms having gone through what I've gone through to even start even earlier. That seems to be very contradictory to what people, I think people in general today feel like um that it's better to maybe start having children as you're more set and older in life. And a lot of that comes from going back to my father. I had always kind of hoped that by the time my father was retired, that he could sit in the office and work with me, and we could actually both work together, and that would be fun. And unfortunately, that's not in the cards. But I think that way even about my kids. I started taking my oldest, who's 15, on the road with me when we go and do cigar
Oh, that's
event.
cool.
And so it's it's probably my most enjoyable part of spending time together. And if one of these days he wants to get in the business, it'd be really cool to have him in the same office, and I could be a pain in his ass. And
There you go.
But yeah.
There you, nice. Yeah, I wish I had started around the age that you started. That'd been cool. But so speaking of the business, rather have 25 count boxes or 20 count boxes?
I'm going to say 20 because, well, 25 makes better business sense from our side. 20 count is where we're at, and I'm happy with that. I think if retailers wanted it, they would probably want 10 count boxes, but
yeah,
there's never a good number for that.
True. All right, just a couple more of these. So this one's a little different. It's not it's sort of two choices. I'm excluding Fresno and Biloxi.
Okay.
Because those are the places that you spent the most time, it seems like. What place would you choose to live out of all the places you've lived?
I'd probably choose Texas. I'd probably go and live in Texas.
Good man. Playing to the crowd. I like it. Thank you.
I like San Antonio a lot.
Me too.
I like Texas a lot. There's just a lot of redeeming values about it, and I would probably choose Texas if it's in the U.S. Yeah.
Yeah, I love San Antonio. I'm from the Dallas-Fort Worth area. That's where I live, but I was born and raised in El Paso, Texas. So San Antonio is like the nice go-between for me, between the Dallas-Fort Worth area and my hometown, without being my hometown. People are like, "Oh, would you ever go back home?" And I'm like, "No, no, never would." So if my kids ever said that they were like moving to El Paso and they were going to settle down and raise a family there, I'd be so happy for them. It's a great place to raise a family. I grew up there, loved it. And from that perspective, but I couldn't wait to get away. I think it's like in every generation, like every other generational city.
West Texas is almost a different country for Texas, right?
It's a very different. Yeah, it's very different. Very, very, very different. Yes, 1000%. Yeah. We talked about that familial Southern kindness and stuff. And like, there's really nice people in my hometown, but that is so much different than the Dallas-Fort Worth. The Dallas-Fort Worth is it's the South, right? And El Paso is just not. They're not, they're the Southwest United States. That's what that is.
Yeah.
So, all right, last one. Would you rather stop and smell the roses or pick wildflowers?
I'd probably stop and smell the roses.
Okay. All right. Well, that was the this or that segment, little rapid fire for you. Going into this other one, we talked about your father and his time. So now we're going to talk about your time, and that plays in perfectly to the Asylum moment, which is brought to you by Asylum Cigars. Refuge is more than just a physical place. It can be state of mind. Some of life's greatest reflections can be found in our own personal asylum. Moments like these were made for Asylum Cigars. So light up an asylum and choose your refuge. So Ian, this whole segment is about, you've probably had a few of these moments in your life. I'm not trying to say pick the best one or the number one but something that comes to mind where, like you had mentioned, alluded to earlier in our conversation, cigars are very much the cigar shop culture. We're a community-driven community. You know, like we smoke cigars together. The Holy Smokes group. It's about community and everything. But every so often, we get to share a cigar with just ourselves, and it can be a moment, maybe of celebration, maybe a moment of thought, seeking clarity, any number of reasons. What's a moment that comes to mind where you were just alone by yourself with a cigar? And if you can remember what the cigar was and what the moment was about, that'd be great.
Wow. Tough question. I don't know if I have one particular moment because my personal favorite moment of enjoying cigars is it's always the first cigar in the morning alone with coffee. And I try to do that as much as I can, because I feel like that's the real time when I can taste everything about that cigar. And it lets me figure out what I'm going to do for the rest of the day. And so I try to take that moment all the time. And it's always in the morning. It's always with the cigar. It's always that first one. And yeah, it's just probably there's one moment, it's going to be in that time frame for sure.
Awesome. What was your cigar this morning?
La Madrina Shade.
Okay.
The Robusto.
Nice. I do that every Sunday. I wish I could do it every day. Maybe they'll get it to a point in my life when I could do it every day, but I do that every Sunday.
I can't do it every day, but I do it often.
Yeah, nice.
Do it often.
Well, that was perfect. That was our asylum moment. Refuge is more than just a physical place. It can be a state of mind. Some of life's greatest reflections can be found in our own personal asylum. So light up an asylum and choose your refuge. Or in Ian's case, it's every morning, or almost every morning, a cup of coffee. Okay. So we talked a little bit about food. We mentioned the Gulf Coast and talking about New Orleans here and something. So this is next segment is brought to you by Postano Cigar. It's called Everybody Eats. If you always make sure that your servant's towel is bigger than your appetite, everybody will always get theirs. Postano Cigars is more than just great cigars made by cool people. They embody an attitude of gratitude and grit. With Postano, everybody eats. So wanted to ask this. What is the best experience or notable experience that you can remember of eating with other people?
Most notable, I've had a lot of notable moments with eating with folks. One of the few things that I enjoy at the trade show every year is the fact that I get to sit down with our guys and a couple friends and enjoy a great meal together. And usually it's a couple of our brokers and national sales managers, just that. And every year it's notable. It's always notable. There's always a time where it's notable. And there are some traditions that we even have, you know, my Alex S is he's been with me forever. And we always go to the same restaurant every year at the first day of the trade show every year. And that's always notable. And I always look forward to it every year because it's, we think about all the previous years. And so it's always.
Do you mind sharing the restaurant or is it a secret?
Yeah, it's we go to Capitol Grill.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Do you get something different each time or do you gravitate towards a specific dish?
Yeah, it doesn't matter. You know, we just, it's really never even about the food at that point. At some point, it just always becomes the camaraderie. And it's always one of those, God, I can't believe we made it this year. Hopefully we'll be here next year. And it's one of the things I look forward to every year at the trade show. But I've had a lot of, I love eating. I love food. And one of the things I love about traveling around the country and meeting people is going to places that are enjoyable and mean something to them there. And so there's always these great moments of, I can list off 30 or 40 of them of going to cool places. And, just as example, when I took my son out to New York, New Jersey, and Philly, we went to every cigar shop in Philly and asked them what the best Philly cheesesteak was, and did a power tour of the best
Nice.
Philly cheesesteak according to Philly people, and so that's super that's super memorable, just that process of that and whatnot.
Did you find a favorite when you were doing the tour?
Yeah, Cafe Caramello, I think, is the best, followed by I think it's Angelo's downtown. It's also a pizza place. It's also one of those top, with a Dave Portnoy places.
Oh, okay, cool.
One of those places. But yeah, those two are I think the concessions from what I've gone through and from what other people have told me as well. But yeah, Cafe Caramel is pretty outstanding.
Nice. Awesome. Well, we have come to the end of our show. We have one last question for you, Ian, and this is going to be another exclusionary question. But it is our curveball question, which is always brought to you by Dunbarton Tobacco and Trust. Fastballs or curveballs, it doesn't matter. Since the company's inception, Steve Saka has been knocking them out of the park. Count them up, 8 consecutive years in the consensus top 3. Congratulations to our good friend, Mr. Steve Saka. Now, before the curveball question, I normally don't ask this question this early, especially after the trade show wrapping up just a couple weeks ago, everything. But we do have a little bit of an interesting twist this year. The trade show is coming up a lot sooner than it is normally. Is Dapper planning to return to the trade show next year?
Yeah, we'll try to be there every year that we can. So we've signed up for it. We'll certainly be there in some capacity.
Perfect. Well, the Capitol Grill will get one more visit from you guys before we make our way over to New Orleans. So good stuff. So here's the question. Knox is off the table. Your original factory is off the table. What factory? Money doesn't matter. Tobacco doesn't matter. Like, you can have the same access to the same tobacco to make the products that you're making now. What factory would you like Dapper cigars to be made at if Noxa and your original factory weren't available?
Well, you guys will find that out in the next 6 months. So we've been blending cigars in a different factory in a different country.
Oh, nice little teaser. Look at that.
Well, you will see a different side to our profile, and yeah, I don't want to spoil it, but it's pretty cool. We're real excited to bring different profiled products from a different factory with a different take on things. So yeah, people will find that out in 6 months.
I promise I'm not trying to pry too much. You obviously aren't prepared to talk about it right now, and that's fine. I want to respect that. But since you have gone through this process of evaluating and looking at, other places to manufacture your products, what were some of the key things that you did evaluate when you were kind of making this decision?
So yeah, we visited a lot of factories in a lot of countries that I did. And I think when I go and I look at factories today, I look at it with a much different light, having experienced things over the years, and I kind of have different, more informed opinions about how cigars should be made. And I look at I look at access to tobacco. Always, that's big. Simply because if we're going to make multiple cigars at the factory, we need to be able to have access to different profiles of tobacco from different countries as well. So that's a huge thing. And then I need to really be able to resonate with the factory manager, and I need to resonate with who is in charge of their production, if they're both the same people or if they're different. But I need to really have a connection. And ultimately, I'll also have to really admire what they're making out of the factory. You know, I'll spoil it and say that it's in a different country. But if I took your question and you asked me the same question, said, hey, where would you make cigars if you could make them in Nicaragua? I probably would without hesitation say Pepin, my father. You know, that's probably without hesitation. Close running would be you know, AJ or Perdomo. But you know, I admire a lot of what comes out of Pepin's factory. I admire a lot of both from Pepin and both from Tatuaje, all kind of one and the same per se, but you know, and their access to tobacco and the fact that they grow a lot of tobacco now. And yeah, I mean, and their overall how they run their operations and how tremendous that is. Yeah, I would say that without a doubt. Yeah, a lot of it goes into it, and it's not just the size, even though Pepin's a huge factor. It's a huge situation. There has to be some size element, but more importantly, there's got to be experience, there's got to be access to tobacco, and there's also got to be a willingness to do something a little different and willingness to experiment a little bit. There has to be a flexibility on the side of the people making the cigars, because we're trying to make cigars that offer different profiles and different blends and different presentations to people. So we obviously do not want to do the same thing over and over again. And I think what's convenient for factories that are big, or any factory, is to make the same things over and over again. It makes sense from a you know, from a cost perspective and ease of production. But to be able to make things that are a little bit unique and a little bit more experimental is what we're looking at. So yeah.
Awesome. I have to imagine this is the case. So I know the answer to the question, but it's just interesting having it said out loud. I mean, were you because I know how hands-on you are in the blending process and everything, with I guess sort of the exception of the Desvelado Diesel, but were you able to be just as hands-on at this new factory as you have been at Noxa?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's a no-brainer.
Okay.
We have to really, and that's what we also have to really trust and resonate with the blenders, the production managers, and the general manager. Everybody at the production level in the factory, we've got to really have a good connection with. We got to really be able to trust that whoever their line guy is that's managing the production on the floor gets what we're doing, understands what we're doing, and isn't one of those people that does what they want to do despite what you tell them, because that's just how they do it. We want to be able to go down the road and go, hey, look, help us get to here with your knowledge, but trust me, let's use this, let's go this way, let's try this. And having a factory that is willing to do that, it's difficult to find. And then also having a factory that has access to tobacco doesn't mean that they necessarily have to have all the tobaccos in reserve, but just that they have the ability to get access to that tobacco consistently. That's going to be that's a big one for us. So we'll see how this will play out. Yeah.
Awesome. I have to say, the idea, I know that they're not it because you just alluded to them because it's outside of Nicaragua, but the idea of Ian Reith playing with the bourbon barrel aged tobacco that Perdomo has, or the style that Pepin has with the double binder, that's kind of exciting in either way. That'd be really cool.
I think the Pepin's like the ultimate intimidation, right? Because you're like going in there going, okay, well, what are we going to make that's going to be better than what you already make? It's like you want to bring something to the table, and just being able to learn from people that you haven't dealt with or you haven't made cigars with. That's very exciting in and of itself, and especially if it's people that you look up to, or it's people that you know are like, whoa, man, these guys, man, what can I learn from them? So yeah, but those are all factories that on the top of my mind are impeccable factories, you know.
Well, the answer to the curveball segment will be found out in 6 months, and we're excited about that. So that's good stuff coming from me and Reith of Dapper Cigars. And that concludes our show, everybody. Thank you so much for everyone hanging out with us late as always on a Sunday evening. And we had a great conversation with Ian, and we're looking forward to seeing what he is coming down the pipe later on. And we'll see him at the trade show early in 2024. So really exciting stuff to come. Without further ado, everybody, that wraps it up. So we appreciate all those likes, shares, and comments. Keep them coming on the Facebook page. Check out our YouTube channel as well, ELOSOFUMAR. You can hit the subscribe button when you're on that page. If you already are a subscriber, that's fantastic. Likewise, if you're listening to us later on podcasts, wherever you listen to podcasts, whether that be on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Play, Podbean, or wherever you listen to podcasts, including iHeartRadio, do me a favor, hit the download, subscribe, or review button, or all three. If you already are a subscriber, that's great. Hit unsubscribe though, but don't forget to hit resubscribe, because that really helps my numbers, and that, really helps me out. And that way I can get great guests like Ian whenever I want. So do that for me, and that'd be great. But for everyone out there, as always, it's been a pleasure. I've been looking forward to this conversation for so long, Ian. Thank you so much for your time tonight. You mentioned you have a family. I've got a family, so time away from family is precious, and I don't take it lightly. And I'm very appreciative to you. So thank you so much.
Hey, thank you very much. I appreciate you giving me the opportunity. Had a great time. We'll see you.
All right. So for everyone out there, I'm Barry Duplessis, live from the Alec Bradley Lone Star Studios of Azle, Texas. He's Ian Reith of Dapper Cigar Company. Guess what, everybody? We'll see you next time.